but glad you made it to the Madison show. How are you?
I'm great, Joe. Thanks for having me on.
And let me tell you, I have shared with this audience, and Sherry is next to me, and that we spent a week in Haiti together. And it was an eye-opener for all of us, and so I just want people to know that we have had our time together. But I never thought I'd be talking to you about this experience you've had. And I've asked people, and many people have said, what are you going to ask her? What are you going to ask her? Now, I'm going to start off with some really interesting parts of your book, and especially as it relates to black folk. But here's my first question. Is there a tape with Donald Trump using the N-word, and who has it, and if you have it, will you play it now?
First of all, absolutely, there is a tape of him saying that. You may know from the headlines you've read, Donald Trump has now sought to start arbitration proceedings against me to silence me. So I can't talk a whole lot in great detail about that, but he and his entire legal team has filed that, and they intend to take me to task for not only the book, but the cadre and treasure trove of tapes and things that I have that will blow the whistle on a lot of things, in addition to the N-word tape. But absolutely, there is a tape of him saying that and terrible things about African Americans.
One of the things I read was, and I'm going to take a little different tack than what some of the other media outlets have taken. What is this about him seeing a photograph of Harriet Tubman and then insinuating that that's an ugly woman? What was behind that?
Well, just as a little background, during the President Obama's administration, there was a national kind of competition that happened for people to give feedback about who they wanted to have on a United States currency, on a $20 bill. And Harriet Tubman was chosen during the Obama administration. I don't know if you recall that.
Oh yes, it was. They had Rosa Parks, Harriet Tubman. I mean, absolutely. And we thought it was in the bag.
We thought it was in the bag until the Trump administration came in, and they were hell-bent on dismantling every single thing that President Obama did during his tenure. And so it was surprising to me that when asked, Secretary Mnuchin would not comment or at least commit to keeping Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill. And so I quickly put together a brief. I consulted with advisors, and I made a pitch and a briefing memo to all parties that were involved, including the president. When I put that memo in his briefing book, I also included a mock-up of the bill that would feature Harriet Tubman's image on it. And that comment is what he said: you want to put that face on a $20 bill.
And that's what he said in the meeting.
That is what he said. He said that to me during my briefing. That was his reaction.
And so now this leads to the... So what was your response?
My response is I told him it was completely inappropriate, and I said, are you telling me that the reason that you all are delaying honoring the wishes of the American people, because as I said, Americans voted and gave their feedback about who they wanted on the $20 bill. And I said, because the way she looks. And he said, oh, no, you don't know how to take a joke. What are you forgetting about my humor? And I looked at him, and he held the picture, and he looked at it for a very long time, standing there briefing him. It was completely inappropriate. But I will tell you that the Treasury Department has not moved on putting Harriet Tubman on the $20 bill.
All right, let me go to another part of the book, and that was your claim, and is that you had to coach him on to stop saying "you people."
I did.
I mean, and so what? This was just a habit of his, or I mean, what? When you say you had to coach him, where were you headed? Into a black church or talking to a black organization? What was? I mean, how do you coach him What were you saying to him? That it was inappropriate, or what?
Well, First of all, I thought he was operating just out of ignorance. I feel like if you know better, you do better. I'm sure no one has ever taken him to task about some of the very ignorant things that he says, but I was in a unique position to educate him. I thought it was a teaching moment, and so I informed him that it was offensive to refer to people of color as you people. It's the otherness. It separates us. It does not unite us, and I explained that to him very, very clearly. And yet and still to this day, he still uses the term you people. It's really hard to teach an old dog new tricks.
Let me go back to, but let me, all right, so this leads me to some other questions, and that is, you knew he was an old dog when you joined the administration. And I mean, you know, because that's what people are asking. You know, Omarosa, did you not realize who Donald Trump, what you were getting into with Donald Trump?
No, I think it's an important question, and that's one of the things that I answer in my book, is this evolution. Sure, hindsight is 20/20, Joe, and I can stand here and say, now I see a clear picture, and now I see everything. But I'm telling you, when I met him in 2003, and I joined that show, I thought I would head one of his companies, I'd be a successful businesswoman, and one day I'd be a billionaire. That was my aspiration in teaming up with Donald Trump.
Did he promise you that? Did he promise you? No. Did he promise you that? When you joined?
No. The Apprentice was a competition.
Okay.
And that is why I signed up. Is that I would compete against 16 contestants. If you win, you would win an opportunity to lead one of his projects. That's what I meant. For those who don't know the concept of the Apprentice, and so that's why I actually joined that show to be a part of this unique process. Our relationship evolved over 15 years. I can't simply say 15 years later, this is the pinpoint moment where all of these things became very clear, because now here I am 15 years later after this incredible, very bizarre journey of a girl from the Westlake Projects, growing up in extreme poverty, meeting up and working with one of the wealthiest men in America. That's, you know, a story that can only be made in America. But to say to me, didn't you know all of these things back in 2003, I don't think that that's fair. But as things evolved over 15 years, I had a unique opportunity to be in the room and to take him to task for those things. But right now, there is no one in the room. We have no African-American senior advisors in the White House, so they're making decisions about us without us. You can take me to task for going to accept the appointment to the White House, but I will tell you that without having someone there, very dangerous things and policies are being passed and implemented without anyone that looks like you or I, Joe, sitting in the room. And to me, that is very tragic.
And Omarosa, here's what some of your Republicans, that are now Republicans, are saying. You kept those black folk out of the White House. That's what the rub is now. Your response to them?
Joe, first of all, I was not the chief of staff. I appreciate them trying to give me more power and responsibility than I had. In fact, people go to great extents to talk about how little power and access I had and how I didn't know how to do things in the White House. And then on the other hand, these black Republicans want to convince you, a very smart, intuitive man, that me, little Omarosa, the only black woman in the White House, had the ability and the political capital to keep all of those experienced Republicans from coming in the White House, as if I was the head of human resources and chief of staff and all of those other things that you would have to be in order to be effective. I just think that that's ludicrous. I certainly wouldn't block people because, in fact, I was leading the effort. When they're talking about, it's interesting, Michael still talks about submitting a list. He submitted that list to a woman named Elizabeth, who was ahead of the appointment during the transition. Let's just check the facts here. During the transition, none of us had appointments. I had no power to do anything during transition, which is when he submitted that list. It sounds so insane to me that they give me all of this power to control and do all of that. But the truth of the matter is I stayed in my own lane, and that was the Office of Public Liaison.
And what was your responsibility as Office of Public Liaison?
My title was Director of Communication. I was essentially the spokeswoman for the Office of Public Liaison. I was not appointed of African American Outreach. In fact, there was no one to take that position. Barack Obama had 14 people serving in the role of African American Outreach and OPL. In our office, there was no one. And so I was doing double duty. In the comms and press shop, I was the Director of Communications. And then I also had to take on the responsibility of what 14 people would be doing in overseeing African American outreach throughout the country. One person doing 14 people's job.
The other argument or conversation I'm having here at Oak Bluffs is that why didn't you just quit? If you knew all this was happening, we'll go back to Charlottesville, all the things you've written about in the book. Why, Omarosa? Why didn't you just say, you know what, that's it, and I'm out of here?
I'm so glad that you asked me that question, because one of the things that I talk about in Unhinged is the Charlottesville incident and how I was so hot. I was ready to just walk out on that day. And I talked to my good friend of 20 years, Armstrong Williams, and he reminded me first and foremost that in less than 4 weeks I had 100 historically black college and university students coming. They were called the HBCU All-Stars, coming for the White House Conference on Historically Black Colleges and Universities. He also reminded me of all the other African-American initiatives that were going on, and he said, you do not quit in protest. You have a responsibility to, first of all, not let those students down, but to train someone else to take your position before you leave. So you're absolutely right, Joe. I could have thrown up my hands and said, enough of this. You know, folks on the outside were complaining that I was on the inside. The folks on the inside didn't want me there either. And so I was getting beat up from both sides. It was not luxurious sitting in the White House for someone like me, being called names, sellout, token from the outside, and on the inside trying to be backstabbed and undermined by the people at the table. And so let me be very clear. I could have thrown up my hands and quit in protest, and I still would have found that the things that were important to us, from Flint to Chicago to Puerto Rico to HBCUs to hurricane relief to working with black veterans and black law enforcement, trying to keep the Justice Department from undoing all the civil rights initiatives. Sure, I could have thrown up my hands and walked away, and we would be in such a very difficult position. And in fact, we're in that position now because there is no one taking up the task to make sure that those initiatives are done.
So, Omarosa, if you weren't fired, would you still be there?
No, I made it very clear to everyone that the 1-year mark was enough for me. This was my second tour of duty, Joe. A lot of your listeners may not know that I served in the White House before. I served under Bob J. Nash in the Office of Presidential Personnel under Bill Clinton in the White House. And so I wasn't looking to build my resume by saying I worked in the White House. This was my second tour of duty. And the one thing that you know about Washington, 1 year is certainly enough. I would say 1 month in the Trump administration is a lot, but 1 year was tasking. And so I made it very clear to anyone that would listen that the 1 year mark was enough to get and implement all of the priorities that I had, and to go back to my husband, who I just married as a newlywed, and continue to do the work that he and I do at our church called Mount Calvary in Jacksonville, Florida.
Now, here's the other. Let me switch gears. How long were you recording people? And how many? I mean, how long? I'm serious. And I got to tell you, how were you doing it? I mean, what were you? Did you keep your cell phone on? Did you have a pen? I mean, how were you recording making all? And how many recordings do you have?
Thank you so much for those questions. As I said, this is now the focus of a legal action.
That's what everybody wants. Yeah.
I'm not trying to be coy, but I am now being sued by the most powerful and the wealthiest man. And so I'm not taking it lightly. But yes, if I did not have that recording in the Situation Room, Joe, you have to admit, we've known each other for a long time. Would you have believed that John Kelly threatened me and said that things could get ugly for me and that there would be damage to my reputation, or that I was even locked in the Situation Room? Would you
How long were you locked in the Situation Room?
About 2 hours. And
2 hours?
Now,
wait a minute. How did they lock you in? I mean, wait a minute.
Well, first of all, you can't get in without them letting you in, and you can't get out with them pushing a button. It is the most secure place in the world.
And so what happened during those, and you, in the 2 hours doing what?
Threat after threat after threat. Attorneys come in, talking, saying things, threatening, trying to intimidate me, trying to get me to sign a document to say that, yes, this was a peaceful, agreeable separation. And as my attorney's looking at me, telling me not to go into much more detail, but let me tell you something. Why would I be in the Situation Room in the first place? That's the question everybody should be asking.
So were you were called to the Situation Room?
I was called to the Situation Room. I got an email from John Kelly's assistant to my assistant saying, be in the Situation Room because he wanted to discuss a serious matter.
And not his office.
And not his office. By the way, he has one of the largest offices in the West Wing. He has a conference room there. And so everyone should be asking, why did they take the only African-American senior advisor into the basement of the White House? Into the basement. And why, when I asked 4 times if I could leave, did they tell me I couldn't? Why, when I asked for counsel, they told me I couldn't have access to counsel? And why, when I even asked to call my husband, they said I couldn't do that? If I didn't have those recordings, Joe, people would still believe that reporter who made up the story that I was being drugged around the White House, running around crazy and setting alarms off. Thank God I had the presence of mind to record that situation. Otherwise, your listeners would be still thinking that I was acting a fool up on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
Now, the other thing, is it true that Donald Trump chews up some of his notes? I'm not trying to be funny
it's
here.
It's a very serious issue because it's a thing called the Presidential Records Act.
Right.
And the Presidential Records Act requires that every single piece of paper, and whether it's a note, has to be preserved. Even if he writes a note on a napkin,
I've been in the White House and I've had former President Obama say, "Don't give me anything, don't hand it to me."
Exactly.
You know, because he has to file that. But let's just answer the question directly.
So here's the answer. Let me give you background because you're asking me a question that comes from Unhinged, and I want people to, of course, know the backstory. Michael Cohen, who is currently under investigation for paying off a porn star or whatever else he did for Donald Trump, I actually took him into the Oval Office. I left him and Donald Trump sitting there at the desk. They had a conversation. I had to escort Michael Cohen out of the room because he only had a green badge. When I went back in to tell Donald Trump I was leaving to see if he needed anything else, he was tearing up a paper, putting it in his mouth, and chewed it up. Unusual, one, to see an adult chewing a piece of paper, but particularly because he's a germaphobe. And the other thing is, because they were going through such scrutiny, Michael Cohen and Donald Trump, the most bizarre thing I ever saw, which is why I wrote about it in the book.
Wow. And you also have in the book that he called his son a F up.
Yes, it's been very hard to...
You heard that?
Oh, yeah, he talks about Don Jr. Well, I should say everyone in Trump world knows that he thinks that his son is a disappointment, that he thought that his son would...
Don Jr.
Don Jr., yeah.
Uh-huh.
He's very kind to Eric, but he's very, very hard on his firstborn, on Don Jr., and he says very, very mean things to him. And he berates him. We were on The Apprentice together, Celebrity Apprentice, Don Jr. in the boardroom. If he said something stupid, maybe a father has a right to say whatever he wants to his son. So I'm not judging his parenting style.
Right.
But the way he talks to his son is so demeaning. It just seems to break his spirit.
You also write that you think the First Lady is biding her time, and that she's ready to get out of the marriage after he's president.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, wait a minute. Is that just your
That's my personal opinion. That's my personal opinion from knowing them for 15 years.
Based on what?
Based on knowing them for 15 years and how she reacted to things in the White House and the things that she would say when I had conversations with her or when she shared and intimated things. I've known Melania since she was engaged to Donald, not just married to him, engaged. You have to go back to 2003. And I can tell you that she is biding her time. She is fed up with him. And you will see her making public statements that completely go against what her husband is saying. That is unprecedented in the history of any presidential marriage, to see the First Lady completely go against the grain of her husband, the president.
All right, and we only and again, I thank you for coming on and keeping your word that you would, and all of that. And let me I'm going to ask this question: Has Donald Trump ever hit on you?
Donald Trump hits on all women. He acts inappropriately with all women. And
well,
yes,
you are. Wait a minute. You are a woman.
In that. Yes.
Yeah, you are a woman. Has Donald Trump ever hit on you?
Yes, I'm included in that number of women who Donald Trump has said inappropriate things, has looked at inappropriately. That is how, and in fact, I talk about a particular scene in the book where Donald Trump walks up and he grabs a woman during a shoot, a TV guide shoot that I'm a part of, and he grabs her, he starts talking to her in inappropriate ways, and I describe him as a dog off the leash, because he does behave inappropriately with women. And to answer your question, yes, I have been one of them.
Omarosa, thank you. If you find that tape, will you call me?
Joe, make sure you grab a copy of Unhinged. My book is on sale now.
Oh, I think a lot of people after this interview are going out to buy that book now. It's a lot more than the Unhinged. Unhinged is the book. Thank you. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Joe.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.